a year in life expectancy in the U.S.?
I mean, it's a huge deal, Jake. This is one of the things that we measure the progress and sort of how well we did as a society from a healthcare standpoint, and we're going in the wrong direction. I mean, almost since we started really measuring life expectancy regularly, the numbers have been going up. Certainly in the developed world, there was some blips here over the last few years because of opioids had a significant impact, but a full year drop. Jake, if you start to apply that across a population, you're talking about millions of life years that have been lost now because of this. And we have to see, is this a trend now, or does it go back up, in a few years from now?
And this report also found, even more troublingly, that life expectancy for Black Americans dropped 2.7 years. Why?
Right. Yeah, I mean, it's the same, the same disparities that we've been talking about. All the things that have led to life expectancy dropping overall in our society have been amplified in Black and brown Americans. So you're right, 2.7 years for African Americans. Life expectancy has dropped nearly 2 years now for Hispanics as well. So this is going to be something we need to follow. We spend so much money on healthcare. If life expectancy is going in the wrong direction, we obviously have to, again, see is this going to be a trend? And this was just the first half of 2020 that was taken into account, Jake. So we got to see what the final numbers are and if that's a trend or we can reverse that.
Take a listen to Dr. Fauci talking about the timeline in the U.S. to get everyone vaccinated.
How long it will take to vaccinate people will really depend upon the efficiency with which you get doses into people's arms. So they'll be available in July. It may take an additional couple of months, actually, maybe towards the end of the summer, to get everybody vaccinated.
It just feels as though the benchmark timeline for any sort of return to normalcy keeps getting pushed back further and further.
It's interesting, Jake, because I think, as we've talked about, a year ago or 6 months ago, it was always sort of dialing back some of the aspirations. Things were being overpromised. And I think it almost seems like there's a little bit of a deliberate effort in the messaging now to sort of under-promise, And so, look, I think we've done the back of the envelope calculations on this. We've talked to vaccine manufacturers. There's a humility because things can go wrong. But when we look at this and say, to get to that point of herd immunity, what are we talking about here? Taking into account the existing vaccines, Johnson & Johnson possibly coming online, and also a lot of people who already have some immunity because they've been infected. Still look at sort of, end of June to get to that time frame. Everyone that wants a vaccine getting one. Remember, 70% of the country wants one. About 30% say they don't want one still. So that likely is going to be sort of end of June, July time frame.
The CDC plans to invest $200 million in genetically sequencing samples of the virus. Is that a smart allocation of resources?
Yeah, Jake, we have been sort of blindsided by some of these new strains. We hear about them, and by the time we actually start to get eyes on them, they're already pretty widespread. The variant that emanated from the UK, it's in so many states now around the country, and it's doubling almost every 7 to 10 days. We want to know ahead of time for two reasons: so you can identify it, but also if it is one of these strains that may require new vaccines or boosters or something like that, we want to know that early as well. So it's important money. They're spending about, I think, $1.5 billion on testing overall, $200 million, as you mentioned, for this. A lot of money towards just getting more testing out there, developing new tests. We talk about vaccines all the time. Testing remains very important, Jake.
And Sanjay, Pfizer just announced they've administered first vaccine doses to pregnant women as part of a global trial. Tell us more about that. What do they hope to learn?
So this is the first actual trial now. You remember in the original trials, pregnant women were not part of those trials. There were women who became pregnant during the trial. And then since the vaccine has been released, there are women who are pregnant who said, I know there's no data, but I'd still like to go ahead and get the vaccine. And about 20,000 women have done that. And there hasn't been really any significant side effects. But now you want an actual trial. They're going to look for safety. They're going to look for efficacy, meaning are pregnant women generating the same antibody response. But they're also going to look at the fetus and baby and follow the baby 6 months afterwards for safety, but also to see, do antibodies then go to baby and provide protection for baby after pregnancy?
Interesting. Dr. Sanjay Gupta, thanks so much. Appreciate it. A big unveiling at the White House today. a next major legislative priority, and the president may already be open to compromise. I'm going to talk to the key Democratic senator behind the Biden plan for immigration. That's next. In our politics lead today, the White House today turning up the pressure on lawmakers to pass President Biden's $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief plan. The Biden administration is also unveiling a far-reaching, perhaps even radical immigration bill, perhaps too ambitious to get through Congress as is, offering, for instance, a path to citizenship within 8 years for most of the 11 million undocumented immigrants in this country, including the so-called Dreamers. The bill has comparatively little emphasis on border security, and there are many other sweeping changes. As Caitlin Collins reports, President Biden has already signaled he's open to compromise.
President Biden preparing to take a crack at his next legislative battle.
There is a reasonable path to citizenship.
Today, Democratic lawmakers unveiled what he believes that reasonable path is, introducing the most far-reaching immigration overhaul attempted in 3 decades, while acknowledging how other efforts have crashed and burned.
Sometimes it seems that cynicism can defeat us before we even try. I get it. I really do. Congress has tried and failed in the past, and we aren't naive about the challenges that we face.
Biden's plan would offer an 8-year path to citizenship for 11 million undocumented immigrants while expanding worker visas and reducing restrictions on family immigration. It would also remove the word alien from immigration laws and replace it with non-citizen.
Everyone is entitled to be treated with decency, with dignity.
But passing immigration legislation in Washington is like landing on the moon. It rarely happens, and politics have only become more polarized since the last time lawmakers tried.
I think 2013 is the year of immigration reform. I really do believe it.
We all wish we didn't have this problem, but we do, and we have to fix it.
With a slim majority in the Senate, Democrats have acknowledged it'll be tough to get the 10 Republicans needed on board, leading some to suggest breaking the bill up into smaller pieces.
If you had a refugee bill by itself, I'm not suggesting that, but there's things that I would deal by itself.
Right now, Biden's top aides aren't saying how they believe the bill will become law or when.
In terms of the mechanisms or the timeline or the mechanics, we're happy to have that conversation in the weeks ahead. But today, the bill is just being officially introduced.
Now, Jake, President Biden has just issued a statement a few minutes ago about why he thinks this proposal is so urgent. And in part, he says that the last 4 years of misguided policies have exacerbated the already broken immigration system and highlighted the critical need for reform. That's his basis for why he thinks this needs to get passed. But of course, Jake, the United States has not passed a major citizenship bill since Ronald Reagan was in office. So this idea that Biden and his aides have floated that this could potentially be bipartisan, we should note that Republicans are already signaling that they are not on board with what Biden is laying out in this proposal.
All right, Caitlin Collins at the White House, thanks so much. Joining us now, Democratic Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey. He introduced the comprehensive immigration bill today. A reminder, 60 votes are needed to pass this legislation. And Senator, you know that better than I do. 60 votes for this bill as it is seems unlikely. It makes huge changes to immigration law. It expands worker visas so more non-Americans can come to work in the United States. It all but erases restrictions on family-based immigration. It doesn't focus all that much comparatively on border security. What are you willing to change to get 60 votes in the Senate?
Well, Jake, we will never know how much reform we can achieve if we don't try. I'm not going to wave the white flag before we even start, number one. Number two, as part of the Gang of Eight in 2013, we were told it couldn't be done. We ended up with 68 votes in the United States Senate at the time to pass comprehensive immigration reform. Unfortunately, Speaker Boehner and the Republicans in the House never gave it a vote, so it didn't see the light of day. Otherwise, we wouldn't be talking about this subject today. It would have been done. So I think that the question is, we want to see robust reform. This legislation is a vision of what ultimately we would like to see immigration reform be like. But we want to see robust reform. So we will look at every single avenue in order to achieve as much as we can. So some of that may be freestanding legislation on the floor. The House of Representatives passed big elements of this legislation in the last Congress. They didn't have a Senate willing to take it up. That's changed now. They didn't have a president leaning in. On the contrary, we had a president who was the worst nightmare for immigrants and the rule of law as it relates to those who come to our country through refugee status, for example. So it's a different dynamic. There's work to be done. There's a challenge to be done. But whether reconciliation is another option for parts of it, whether the appropriation process may be parts of some of it,
right.
The goal is to achieve as much robust reform as we can.
But, Senator, look, you could have taken that bill that passed the Senate that John Boehner, when he was Speaker, refused to bring up, and you could have introduced that bill, which is a compromise legislation that was hammered out between Democrats and Republicans, but you're not. You guys are doing a different approach. You're offering this very progressive legislation. What do you say to someone who says that this bill that you introduced today seems more designed for a campaign ad to win votes of Latino voters and others than serious legislation that has a chance of getting 60 votes?
Well, Jake, I would just say, look, after being in Congress between the House and the Senate for nearly 3 decades, it would be a bad strategy for me to start negotiating on a previously negotiated, piece of legislation. Times have changed. We have different dynamics. And this bill actually has, I've talked to some of my Republican colleagues in the Senate. Some of them come from big ag states. They'd like to see the farm worker provisions taken care of. Others come from large meat packing or poultry plants. They want to see those elements taken care of. Others come from high-tech states, and they want to see the visas as it relates to high tech and making sure that the best and brightest we have studying at our universities can ultimately stay here and be part of the innovation for America. So, but if you want that, then you have to be part of something else. And that's what the negotiation ultimately is all about, and getting us to a better point. So I don't think it's a campaign ad. And what I do think, it is a blueprint. Let's work on how many different elements of the blueprint we can make happen.
So are you against the idea that President Biden seemed to be suggesting of breaking this up into pieces and passing those individual pieces? This part's on refugees, this part's on farm workers, this part's on high-tech workers, as opposed to this, big comprehensive whole?
Well, what I want to achieve is robust reform. What we can't have is breaking it up into pieces that leaves largely the 11 million undocumented in the country who are doing some of the most difficult jobs, essential work, so that we could stay home during the pandemic, and they were risking their lives every day and doing the work that no one else wanted to do. So the question is, for me, less about process and more about what guarantees us significant elements of that 11 million and the other elements of immigration reform. Look, we want to have border security, but we think that technology, in addition to everything that's already been done, we have more border patrol than we've ever had. We spend more on border patrol than we do in all of the other federal law enforcement entities combined. So it's time to take a new look at how do we ensure the border. For example, drugs coming into the country, they come through legal ports of entry. We just don't have the screening and scanning capacity necessary. That's something that we address in this bill. So it's just a new look on how we deal with an old problem. And I think that when people take a look at it, some of our colleagues who are concerned about different elements of the economies and the states they represent, they would find some common cause in this.
All right, Democratic Senator Bob Menendez of New Jersey, thanks so much. Hope you will come back as this goes through the process, and we will keep tabs on this. And it's an important issue, obviously didn't get a lot of attention during the last 4 years. So let's keep coming back on the show, and let's keep talking about it.
Thank you, Jay. It got attention. It was all the bad attention.
Right. Well, there wasn't a lot of legislation, is all I meant. Coming up, the scandal surrounding New York's Governor Cuomo, COVID, nursing homes. It's taking another very serious turn. That's next. Staying with our politics lead, there could be legal, not just political fallout for New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo and his administration. CNN has learned that the FBI and U.S. Attorney's Office in Brooklyn have launched a preliminary inquiry into the Cuomo administration for its handling of coronavirus deaths at New York State nursing homes, according to a law enforcement official. It was last week that the Democratic governor's top aide privately admitted to delaying reporting the number of deaths in nursing homes. so that the data could not be used against them by the Trump administration. It was, of course, almost a year ago, last March, when Cuomo's administration ordered nursing homes to take in any patient, even if they had the coronavirus. CNN's MJ Lee joins us now. MJ, what exactly